Richard Calloway hadn't pressed himself behind a flower pot since he was around 7 years old. At 58, he was worth close to $400 million, give or take a few $100,000 depending on the quarter's performance. He maintained a driver, a security team, and 3 assistants who orchestrated his schedule with the precision of seasoned air traffic controllers. Yet here he stood, wedged against a stone planter on his own estate's driveway, because a 10-year-old boy had seized his sleeve and murmured with absolute certainty, "Don't move. Follow me." He'd followed suit, though the reason remained unclear. The boy crouched beside him now, a single finger pressed to his lips, introducing himself as Theo, the grandson of Richard's groundskeeper, visiting for the weekend while his mother was away on business. Freckled and serious-eyed, dressed in a navy sweater that swam 2 sizes too big, Theo possessed the quiet observation skills of a child who speaks only when he has something meaningful to contribute. Across the driveway, Richard's head of security, Darius, a large, formidable man, stood beside the car with his back turned, prepared to ferry his employer toward an airport departure in 90 minutes. "What exactly?" Richard whispered hoarsely. "Are we doing?" Theo raised one finger. "Wait." Richard complied. He'd arrived at the estate that morning feeling perfectly composed. He always felt that way. Perfect composure had been his approach for 7 years, ever since his wife Carol had died, and his response to every hardship had been to work harder, move faster, fill his calendar until silence couldn't trap him with his grief. It had worked. The company had tripled its value. His schedule remained immaculate. He felt consistently fine. Theo had been lingering around since Friday. George, the groundskeeper, had offered 2 apologies for his grandson's presence. Richard had dismissed the concern, claiming no problem existed, but Theo had a habit of materializing in unexpected locations. On Saturday morning, Richard discovered him perched on the library steps, absorbed in a book about migratory birds with the intense focus of genuine scholarship. Saturday afternoon found Theo watching Richard take a phone call from the terrace, observing him the way children study subjects they're trying to comprehend, then asking, "Do you always look like that when you talk to people?" "Like what?" Richard had replied. "Like you're already somewhere else." Richard couldn't formulate a response. Sunday evening arrived, and Theo intercepted him in the driveway as Richard walked toward the car, luggage in hand, bound for another city for yet another meeting, seizing his sleeve with surprising urgency. "Don't move. Follow me." Richard crouched behind a stone planter brimming with geraniums while Darius remained 20 feet away, standing sentinel. "Theo," he whispered quietly, "I have a plane." "I know," Theo replied without looking up. He was focused on something near the garden gate. "Just wait." "For what?" "You'll see." Richard scanned the garden gate but saw nothing unusual. He turned his attention back to Theo, who wore the expression of someone who'd been waiting for this precise moment and refused to rush it. Then he heard it, a sound so ordinary Richard would have naturally passed by it entirely. A small brown bird had alighted on the iron gate post and begun singing. Not a performance, not the elaborate display of a species courting a mate. Just a modest bird singing simply because it felt like singing. Theo watched with complete concentration while Richard observed his grandson's intense focus. The bird performed for roughly 40 seconds, then launched into the palms and vanished. Theo turned to Richard. "It comes every Sunday," he said. "Same time, same post. Grandpa showed me." Richard examined the gate post where the bird had perched. "Your grandfather noticed that. He notices everything that occurs in this garden." Theo delivered this as mere fact without judgment. "He's worked here for 12 years. He knows every plant, every bird that visits, which flowers bloom first each morning." A pause. "He says you've never inquired about any of it." Richard fell silent. "He's not upset about it," Theo added carefully. "He just said it. I asked him what you were like, and that's what he said, that you walk through the garden but don't truly see it." Driveway sat in perfect stillness under the evening light. Palm trees caught the sun's final rays while gate posts cast long shadows across the stone. "You pulled me behind a flower pot," Richard said slowly, "to show me a bird." "I pulled you behind a flower pot so you'd have to stop." Theo regarded him with unfiltered honesty. "You were going to walk right past it. You walk past everything." Richard had no reply. Darius had turned around and was now watching his employer crouched in the garden with a 10-year-old boy, maintaining professional neutrality as a man trained to suppress opinions. Richard rose gradually, brushing dirt from his jacket. He gazed at the garden with newfound awareness, truly seeing it, the vibrant colors in the fading light, the graceful movement of palm fronds. The stone planters Carroll had selected years ago during a trip before the company ballooned in value, before his calendar filled completely, before solitude became impossible. Carroll had adored this garden. He'd paid handsomely for its exquisite maintenance for 7 years, yet never paused long enough to hear a bird sing. He settled back down beside Theo on the planter's edge. Darius checked his watch without speaking. "Tell me about the garden," Richard requested. Theo met his gaze to ensure he meant business. Then he launched into his explanation. He described the geraniums and which varieties had bloomed latest this season, explaining George's theory about soil pH imbalances. He discussed the bird, a white-throated sparrow, a winter visitor arriving each October and departing in April. He spoke about how evening light struck the gate at this precise time of year, transforming the stone into a hue Theo couldn't adequately describe, but that his grandfather called gold that knows it's leaving. Richard listened, not the distracted listening of someone already mentally elsewhere, but genuine attention. The missed flight didn't announce itself dramatically. Richard simply called his assistant from the driveway and requested a morning rebooking. His 9-year veteran assistant, who had never once heard Richard voluntarily miss a flight, asked if everything was satisfactory. "Fine," Richard replied. "Actually, yes, everything's fine." He invited George to join them afterward. The quartet strolled through the garden in the waning light while George identified various plants, explained their characteristics, and shared stories from his 12 years of cultivating this particular stretch of land. Richard listened with the focused attention of a man discovering something he hadn't realized he'd lost. Before Theo retreated indoors for the evening, he paused at the doorway and glanced back. "Same time next Sunday," he said, "for the bird." Richard looked toward the gate post. "I'll be here," he promised. Theo nodded, content, and disappeared inside. George lingered in the twilight, and Richard finally met his gaze directly, probably for the first time in 12 years of exchanging brief morning nods and casual comments about garden conditions. "I owe you a conversation," Richard confessed. "Several, probably." George smiled that patient smile of a man who'd waited a long time and didn't require elaborate thanks, though he welcomed them. "The garden will still be here," he said simply. "It always is." Richard didn't transform overnight. The company continued operating smoothly. His schedule remained meticulously filled. Flights departed as planned. But something fundamental had shifted. A small yet significant change in the space between a stone planter and an iron gate post during those 40 seconds of a small bird's Sunday evening song. He began walking through the garden with his eyes truly open. He learned the names of plants and flowers. He asked George questions and gave careful attention to the responses. Every Sunday evening at the appointed hour, he positioned himself at the gate and waited for that small brown bird his groundskeeper's grandson had deemed worth stopping the world for. In time, he understood this was perhaps the most valuable gesture anyone had offered him in years. All it required was a 10-year-old seizing his sleeve with unwavering certainty when he said, "Don't move, follow me," and a man finally choosing to stop walking past everything.